Heidi by Johanna Spyri. Chapter 1. Meeting the Grandfather. It was a sunny morning in June. A tall girl was climbing the mountain path toward Dörfli with a little child. The child was a girl about 5 years old, and although the weather was hot, the little girl was wearing very thick clothes. Her cheeks were red. As they were walking, everybody in the hamlet said to them, "Hello," or "Welcome," because the tall girl was from here, and the people knew her very well. A fat woman named Barbel joined them, and she started to talk with the tall girl. "Is this child your sister's daughter, Deet?" "Yes, her name is Heidi, and I am taking her up to Uncle," said Deet. "I've found a good job, and I'm going away. She must stay with Uncle. He is her grandfather." Barbel was surprised, because the old man wasn't an easy one to live with. Everybody was afraid of him, and he didn't have any friends. Deet and Heidi climbed up the way to the uncle's hut. It was at the top of the mountain, and Uncle was sitting in front of his hut. Heidi ran toward the old man, saying, "Good evening, Grandfather." But the old man wasn't happy to see them. Deet said, "I have brought you your son's child. After my sister died, my mother and I looked after her. But now it is time for you to take care of your son's child." The old man was surprised and angry. Deet said goodbye to both and walked away as fast as she could. Now Heidi was alone with her grandfather. The old man sat down and said nothing. Heidi was enjoying herself. She was searching everything around her. Then she came in front of her grandfather and watched him. "What do you want?" the old man asked. Heidi wanted to see inside the house. They walked into the house together, and the old man told the child to put her clothes in the cupboard. Heidi put them as far back as possible because she didn't want to wear them anymore. There were just a table, a chair, and a bed in the room. The old man put everything he needed in the cupboard: his clothes, food, plates, cups, and glasses. When Heidi saw the upstairs, she wanted to sleep there. There was a heap of hay, and she could see down the valley through a window in the wall. She loved it here very much. Her grandfather helped her with the bed. They covered the heap of hay with a sheet together and made a pillow too. He gave her a blanket, and now it was a nice and warm bed. Heidi helped her grandfather with lunch. She could learn everything quickly. The old man thought that she was a clever girl. And so the time passed happily until evening. Heidi listened to the sound of the wind and danced round the old trees. She played with the two little goats, Little Swan and Little Bear, and after dinner she went to bed. The next morning Heidi got up early. She was happy to wake up in her new home. She ran outside the hut and saw Peter, the goat herd. He came to take Uncle's goats. The grandfather asked Heidi, "Do you want to go with Peter?" Heidi was very happy and said yes. The old man gave them some bread and cheese and said to Peter, "She will stay with you until you return. Take care of her." It was a very bright day. The sun was shining and there were a lot of flowers. Heidi forgot even Peter and the goats. She was so happy. She started to pick flowers and smell them. At last Peter said, "If you pick more flowers, there will be none for tomorrow." Heidi thought he was right. Then they stopped and sat down. The goats were eating their meal. Heidi was very happy among the golden sunlight, the smell of the flowers, and the fresh air. Then she saw a big bird and showed it to Peter. He answered her questions. "Where is it going?" "Home." "Is his home right up there?" "Yes." "Let's climb up there and see its home." "No, it's dangerous." Heidi was playing with the goats when Peter called her. "It's time for dinner." They sat down and started to eat. Heidi shared her bread and cheese with Peter. Peter was surprised and happy. It was the best dinner he has ever had. Heidi asked Peter the names of the goats, and he told her all about them. They jumped and played together. But one of the goats went too near the rocks, and it was about to fall down. Peter ran and held it. Heidi helped him with the goat. Peter was very angry. He wanted to punish it with his stick, but Heidi stopped him. "No, no, Peter, you mustn't do it." Then Peter said, "Okay, but you will give me some more of your bread and cheese tomorrow." She said, "Yes." The sun was sinking and everywhere was red. It was like fire on the mountains. Heidi got very excited, and now it was time to go home. When she got home, she told her grandfather everything. She asked a lot of questions, and he answered them one by one. Chapter 2. The Visit and the Visitors. Summer passed and autumn came. The wind blew stronger, and it was getting colder every day. The grandfather would say sometimes, "Heidi, today you must stay at home." When Peter heard this, he looked very unhappy, but Heidi was never unhappy, because she always found something interesting or funny. She would be happy to stay with her grandfather in the hut. When it started to snow, it was great fun for her. She ran from one window to the other to see the snow. One afternoon, Heidi and her grandfather were sitting at home when Peter came to visit them. The grandfather asked Peter how the school was. Peter said it was the same, and Heidi was curious and excited about it. The grandfather told Heidi, "In the winter, Peter goes to school and learns to read and write." Then she asked Peter a lot of questions. It was getting dark now, and before he left, Peter said, "My grandmother would like you to come and see her one day." Heidi liked this idea, and one morning, when the sun started to shine and melt the snow, the grandfather said, "Come on, Heidi, you can visit them today." He put her in the sleigh and took her to the goat herd's hut. She met Peter's mother, Brigitta, and his grandmother. They had a nice day together. The grandmother loved to listen to Heidi, and Heidi loved to talk to this blind woman. When Heidi got home, she told her grandfather everything, and she said, "Oh, grandfather, their house is very old and poor. It shakes and rattles when the wind blows. The grandmother cannot sleep. She is afraid of the wind. We must go and help her." The grandfather promised to help them. The next day, they got into the sleigh and went to Peter's hut. Heidi was talking to the grandmother when the grandfather mended the house with his hammer. Now the house was safer and stronger. Brigitta and the grandmother thanked Uncle. So the winter passed. Heidi visited them every fine winter's day, and the grandfather always helped them with the house. The grandmother was sleeping in peace now. Time passed quickly, and Heidi was 8 years old now. She was still as happy as the birds. It was time to go to school for her, but the grandfather didn't want to let her go. One afternoon, an old neighbor came to the hut and talked to the grandfather about Heidi. "Good afternoon, neighbor. You know why I am here. You must send her to school." But the grandfather said, "No, I will not. It is very dangerous. Heidi cannot go down the mountain in winter. She is just a little child. My hut is safe and hot. She can live here happily." The neighbor replied, "She must learn to write and read. If it is dangerous to walk down the mountain, you can come down into Dörfli and live among other people." "No, nobody likes me. We will not be happy there," said Uncle. Then the old neighbor left the hut and went down the mountain. The next day, Heidi and the grandfather had another visitor. It was Deet. She was wearing a beautiful dress and looking good. When Deet was away, she always wanted to take Heidi back one day. And now she was sure that it was the time to take her. She was working at a very rich house, and she learnt that some other rich people were looking for a child. They had a daughter, and that little girl was very ill. She couldn't walk, and she was very much alone. So, Her family wanted a friend for this little girl. Diet thought it would be a good chance for Heidi. She could learn and see new things. So Diet said, "I've come to take Heidi to Frankfurt. She is my sister's child. It will be good for her. She must go to school, but you don't let her." The grandfather was very angry. He wanted to speak to Diet, but she said, "Everybody in Dörfli is on my side and nobody loves you. If you go to court, they will say that I am right." Diet took out Heidi's clothes from the cupboard and told her to come. But Heidi said she wouldn't go with her. Then Diet held her hand and said, "Frankfurt is a very nice place. You will like it. If you want to come back, I will bring you here again." Heidi thought it would be just a little visit and she would return home tomorrow. Everybody in Dörfli thought that they were running away from Uncle because he was a bad man. Only Peter, Brigitte, and the grandmother knew how Heidi was happy and how the grandfather was kind to them all. The grandfather was very sad and he didn't talk to anybody after Heidi went away. Chapter 3. Meeting Clara. Clara was the little daughter of Herr Sesemann. She was thin and her cheeks were not red like Heidi's. She couldn't walk, so she was going everywhere in a wheelchair. When Diet and Heidi arrived at Clara's house, the lady housekeeper Fräulein Rottenmeier met them. Diet told her about Heidi, but the housekeeper said, "She's very young and she doesn't know how to read and write. She can't be a good friend for Clara." But Diet left Heidi there, and before she went out, she said, "I must go now, but I will come and see how Heidi is getting on." Fräulein Rottenmeier had to wait and see, but at the same time, she wanted to teach Heidi some rules. She talked so much that Heidi fell asleep. The woman got very angry, but Clara was having fun. The next morning, when Heidi got up, she ran to the window and wanted to look out of it. She wanted to see the trees, the grass, and the mountains, but she couldn't open the window, so she went downstairs. After breakfast, she told Clara all about her life in Dörfli. About 10 o'clock, Clara's teacher came for the lesson. He would also teach Heidi the alphabet and some other easy things at first. The lesson started. Heidi and Clara were listening to the teacher. Suddenly, Heidi heard the noise of the wind in the trees, and she ran out of the room to look at them. She moved so quickly that she didn't know she dragged the tablecloth along with her. All the books and the ink fell down. Fräulein Rottenmeier was very angry, and she ran after Heidi. She said, "It was just the noise of a carriage. Are you crazy, little girl? Come upstairs and see what you have done." Heidi was surprised, but she learned that she had to sit still until the lesson finished. After this accident, Heidi was free until evening. She would do what she wanted, and she asked the servant, Sebastian, to open a window for her. But when she looked out of the window, she didn't like it, because there were only walls and roofs. She asked Sebastian, "How can I see the valley from here?" He answered, "You must climb to the top of a high church, and you can see everything from there." Heidi was excited. She smiled and went downstairs. She opened the door and ran into the street, but she didn't know where to go. She saw a boy with a hand organ on his back and asked him for help. The boy said he wanted some money for it. Heidi said, "I don't have money, but Clara has. She can give you some." Then the boy took her to a church. There was an old man, and Heidi told him what she wanted. He was surprised at first, but he helped her to climb up the church tower and look out of his window. But still she saw nothing but walls and roofs and stones. She was very unhappy. Then she saw some little cats in the garden of the church, and she forgot her unhappiness. The old man told her that she could take all the cats. Heidi took 2 little cats and put them in her pockets. And because the old man knew Clara and her father, he said he would send the other cats to the house tomorrow. Heidi went out of the church and asked the boy to show her the way. The boy took her to Clara's house. Clara and Fräulein Rottenmeier were at the dining table. The old woman was very angry and said, "You did a very wrong thing. You must ask me before you go out. I will speak with you later." And an answer came from Heidi. "Meow." "What? What did you say?" asked the old woman, because she was surprised. "Meow, meow." The woman got very angry, but Heidi said, "It's not me, it's the cats." Fräulein Rottenmeier was afraid of cats very much, and she told Sebastian, "Take them away, take them away." Then she ran out of the room quickly. But Clara and Heidi loved the cats and wanted Sebastian to put them in some place where Fräulein Rottenmeier would never find. Sebastian took the cats, and it was their little secret now. Chapter 4. Heidi Wants to Go Home. The next morning, when Heidi and Clara were in the study with the teacher, a visitor came to see them. It was the boy who helped Heidi to find her way. He was carrying a hand organ again, and he said to Sebastian, "I want to see Clara. She must give me money for showing her the way." Sebastian was surprised. "Are you crazy? Miss Clara never goes out. She can't even walk." But the boy said, "I saw her in the street yesterday, and I showed her the way. Now I want my money." Sebastian knew that it was Heidi, not Clara, and he told the boy to wait. When Clara heard this, she wanted to see the boy. Sebastian told the boy, "Come in, Miss Clara waits for you. And play your organ, because Miss Clara loves music very much." Sebastian thought it would be a funny day like the day before. The boy started to play his organ and walked into the study. The teacher didn't know what to say, but the children were listening to the music happily. When Fräulein Rottenmeier heard the sounds, she came into the study quickly, and she was shocked. She started to shout, "Sebastian, take him out! Take him out!" Sebastian was having fun, but he came and took the boy out. He gave the boy some money and sent him away. After this, the lesson began again. Fräulein Rottenmeier didn't go out this time. She stayed in the study and wanted to see how the lesson went on. But after a few minutes, there were some other visitors. These were the cats. The old man in the church sent them to the house. All the cats started to run in the room and to climb up everywhere. Fräulein Rottenmeier was very much afraid of them, and she couldn't move. Then she shouted again, "Sebastian, come and take all the cats out." After all these, the lesson finished and Fräulein Rottenmeier wanted to punish Heidi. But Clara said, "No, no, you must wait until my father comes. Then I will tell him everything, and he will say what we can do with Heidi." 2 days passed. Clara was very happy to be with Heidi. Clara liked the lessons more now because Heidi was making them funnier. She couldn't learn the alphabet, and she always talked about her goats in the lessons. Heidi always wanted to go home. She was not happy. And one day, she took all her clothes and went downstairs. When Fräulein Rottenmeier saw her, she said, "I'm going home." The old woman was very angry and shouted at her, "No, you can't go now. We must wait for Miss Clara's father." "Why? You must be happy here." But Heidi said, "I must go now. The grandmother and the goats are waiting for me. If I don't give some cheese to Peter, he will punish the goats with his stick. I want to see the fire on the mountains and the big bird in its home." Fräulein Rottenmeier was more and more angry now, and she said, "You are not going anywhere, and don't speak like a crazy girl." Heidi was very sad. She didn't say anything, and she went to her room. The next day, when the children were downstairs, Fräulein Rottenmeier went to Heidi's room and wanted to take out her old clothes and to put some new dresses on. But she got angry again. She went downstairs and asked Heidi, "What did I find in your wardrobe? A lot of bread. Why did you put all the bread there? You must put your clothes in a wardrobe, not your bread." Then she told the servant to take Heidi's old hat and all the bread out. Heidi started to cry and said, "No, no, I love my hat and the bread is for the grandmother. I will give it to her." But Fräulein Rottenmeier didn't listen to her, and she left the room. When Sebastian saw Heidi, she was crying. He felt sorry for her and took the old hat secretly. He put it in Heidi's room because he wanted to see Heidi happy. Clara was very sad for Heidi. She said, "Don't cry, Heidi. Be happy again. I will give you a lot of bread when you go home. You can take it all to grandmother, I promise." Then Heidi stopped crying. That night, when she went to her room, she saw her old hat, and she was happy now. Chapter 5. Herr Sesemann Comes Home. A few days later, Clara's father, Herr Sesemann, came home. He met Heidi, and when he heard that his daughter and Heidi were good friends, he said he was very happy. But Fräulein Rottenmeier wanted to talk to Herr Sesemann and said, "Ah, Herr Sesemann, she is not a normal child. She brings animals home. She sometimes speaks like a crazy girl. She cannot be a good friend for Clara." Then Herr Sesemann talked to his daughter about Heidi. Clara told him everything and said, "Please don't send her away. I love her and we are good friends. Time passes quickly and happily when Heidi is here." Herr Sesemann saw how Clara was happy and said to Fräulein Rottenmeier, "Heidi will stay here, and please be kind to her." After 2 weeks, Herr Sesemann left home again, and before he went, he said to Fräulein Rottenmeier, "My mother, Frau Sesemann, is coming for a long visit. She can help you with Heidi if you like." Chapter 6. Another Grandmother. Heidi thought Frau Sesemann was a nice woman, and she liked her. She was talking to Heidi very kindly. One afternoon, she asked Fräulein Rottenmeier to send Heidi to her room. She wanted to give some books to Heidi, but when she learnt Heidi didn't know how to read, she was surprised. Because she thought Heidi was a clever girl, and she could learn everything easily. Frau Sesemann gave Heidi some books to look at. There were beautiful colored pictures. Heidi was excited and happy, but suddenly she started to cry because she saw some goats, green grass and a goat herd in a picture, and she wanted to be at home with her grandfather again. Frau Sesemann said, "Don't cry, dear child, don't cry. There are beautiful stories to the pictures, and we will read them together. But now stop crying, and we must have a little talk together." Heidi stopped crying, and she was ready to talk now. Clara's grandmother asked her, "Do you like your lessons? Have you learnt much?" Heidi said, "No, it's very difficult. I cannot learn to read. Peter told me about it. He couldn't learn it either." Frau Sesemann said, "Then your friend Peter didn't study his lessons much. I know you can learn, Heidi. Listen to your teacher and study hard. Then I will give you these beautiful books." A few days passed, and Heidi was more and more unhappy. She didn't speak or eat much. Her cheeks were not red anymore. Heidi didn't want to tell anybody about it, because they would think that Heidi didn't like them or she was not thankful. When Clara's grandmother saw Heidi's unhappiness, she asked Heidi, "Now tell me, why are you so unhappy?" "I cannot tell you. I cannot tell anyone about it," Heidi said. Frau Sesemann told her, "Then you must turn to God and ask Him to help you. You can tell God everything." Then Heidi ran into her room and told God what she wanted. She said, "God, please help me. I want to go home to my grandfather." After a week, the teacher told Clara's grandmother that Heidi learnt the alphabet and she could read very well. Frau Sesemann was very happy to hear it, and in the evening she gave Heidi the beautiful books and said, "These books are yours forever." Heidi was happy, and she liked reading. Chapter 7. Clara's Grandmother Leaves Home. Every afternoon Heidi went to Frau Sesemann's room, and she learnt so much from her. Frau Sesemann would talk to Heidi and show her how to make dresses for dolls. Heidi would read books for her, and they would have a nice time. But still, Heidi never looked happy. One afternoon, Frau Sesemann asked Heidi, "Dear child, why are you not happy? Have you told God about it?" Heidi said, Yes, but God does not listen. He didn't do anything for me. Then Frau Sesemann said, You are wrong, Heidi. God heard you. Now He knows what you want, but He will do it when it is good for us. If it is not good, then He waits. But He will make everything good and happy for you one day. Don't stop asking God for His help. Heidi loved and always listened to her, so she went into her room and said to God, Please, God, help me. I will always talk to you. Please send me to my grandfather. After a few days, Clara's grandmother left them and went to her home. Heidi and Clara were very unhappy, and they didn't know what to do. The next day, Heidi started to read stories to Clara again. But when it came to a story about a grandmother, she began to cry, because the grandmother in the story died, and Heidi thought that her grandfather or the grandmother would die too. She wouldn't see them again. When Fräulein Rottenmeier saw her crying, she got angry and said, If you cry again, I will take the book and will not give it back to you. Then Heidi stopped crying because she was afraid that she wouldn't have her book again. The weeks passed away, and Heidi always cried secretly. She didn't eat much. She was always unhappy. Chapter 8. A Ghost in the House. A few days passed. Fräulein Rottenmeier and the other servants were afraid of going alone into some parts of the house, because there was something very strange in the house. They found the front door open every morning. They didn't know what to do. They were very much afraid. One night, Fräulein Rottenmeier wanted Sebastian to wait in the room secretly and to see who opened the door. At about 1 o'clock, Sebastian heard a sound and came out of the room. He saw a white thing at the open door. He couldn't say or do anything, and he ran back to the room. The next morning he told Fräulein Rottenmeier everything, and she wrote a letter to Herr Sesemann. Herr Sesemann was afraid that it would be bad for Clara's health. He came home 2 days later. He thought that it was not a ghost, but he wanted to know what it was. So he wrote a letter to his old friend, the doctor, and he asked for his help. At 9 o'clock in the evening, the doctor came to see Herr Sesemann. They talked about the events and started to wait in the room. At night, they heard a sound at the door. They came out of the room and saw a white thing. But it was Heidi. She was standing at the door. Herr Sesemann was shocked. "What are you doing here, child?" Heidi answered, "I don't know." The doctor took Heidi to her room and wanted to talk to her. "Where were you going, Heidi? Tell me." Heidi said, "I don't know. I was dreaming, and when I opened my eyes, I was at the door." The doctor said, "Tell me your dream then." Heidi told him, "I was at home with my grandfather. I heard the sound in the trees and saw the goats. It was so beautiful." She started to cry, and the doctor said, "Cry, my child. It will do you good, and then go to sleep." The doctor went downstairs to Herr Sesemann. He said, "Heidi walks in her sleep, and she is not healthy. She wants to go home, and she is very unhappy. You must send her back to her grandfather. She can be well in the mountains again." Herr Sesemann said, "She came here happy and healthy, and now I cannot send her back to her grandfather ill and unhappy. We must do something for her." Then Herr Sesemann and the doctor talked about what to do, and they started to wait for the next morning. Chapter 9. Heidi Goes Home. That morning, Herr Sesemann went quickly upstairs to Fräulein Rottenmeier's room. He wanted her to put Heidi's clothes in a bag and to make everything ready for a journey. They woke Heidi up and helped her wear her dress. Herr Sesemann called Diet and asked her to take Heidi to her grandfather, but Diet didn't want to go and said, "There is a lot of work to do. I cannot go with her." Diet was afraid of Uncle, so she didn't want to see him. Then Herr Sesemann told Sebastian to take Heidi home, and he wrote a letter to Uncle. He gave it to Sebastian. After a few minutes, Herr Sesemann went into Clara's room and told her everything. Clara was very much unhappy. She didn't want Heidi to go, but her father said, "She is ill and we must send her. She cannot be happy here." but you can visit her if you want." Clara saw it was the only thing to do, and she said, "Yes, if she will be healthy again, we must send her to Dörfli." When Heidi learnt that she was going home, she got very excited. She couldn't say anything, but they saw her happiness in her eyes. Her Sesamon said to her, "Now, until the carriage comes, go upstairs to Clara." Heidi ran into Clara's room, and they talked a little. Clara gave Heidi a lot of beautiful dresses and a basket of bread. Heidi was very happy when she saw the bread, because it was all for the grandmother. Then she went to her room to take her book and her old hat. Now she was ready to say goodbye to everybody in the house. After a few minutes, Sebastian said, "The carriage is here," and now it was time to go for Heidi. She thanked her Sesamon for everything and said to him, "Please say goodbye to the doctor for me and give him many thanks." Heidi knew that all these were with the doctor's help. Heidi was going home to the grandfather, the mountain, the grandmother, and Peter. She was very happy now. After a long railway journey, Sebastian found a man and told him to take Heidi to Dörfli. The man lived in Dörfli, and he knew that Almunkel was Heidi's grandfather. He said he would take her. Before they left, Sebastian gave Heidi the letter and a parcel. He said, "This letter is for your grandfather. Give it to him, and this parcel is a present from her Sesamon. Do not lose them." Heidi said she would be very careful, and she put them in her basket. The man put Heidi in the carriage, and they left for Dörfli. The man asked Heidi, "Why did you leave Frankfurt? Was it a bad place?" Heidi said, No, it was very nice, and they liked me. But I was not happy there. I wanted to be with my grandfather." The man was surprised, because everybody in Dörfli thought that Almunkel was not a friendly man. When they came to Dörfli, the man told everybody that Heidi was back, because she loved her grandfather and the mountain life. Everybody was shocked, and they wanted to ask Heidi a lot of questions. But Heidi didn't stop to talk with them. She started to climb up the way to the grandfather's hut. Before she went home, she walked to Peter's hut and saw the grandmother. She ran to the old woman and said, "Grandmother, I am here. I have come back." The woman was surprised. She held Heidi's hands and wanted her to talk more. Heidi told her everything, and she gave her all the bread. The grandmother was very happy and said, "Oh, dear child, thank you, and thank God that He has sent you to me again." Then Heidi said she would come tomorrow again, and she left them. She walked up the mountain. There was grandfather sitting in front of his house. Heidi put her basket down, and she ran to him. "Grandfather, grandfather!" The old man was very excited. He couldn't say anything, but he cried. Heidi and the grandfather were very happy to see each other again. The old man asked Heidi, "Why did they send you away?" Heidi said, "No, grandfather, they were all so kind, Clara and her Sesamon, the grandmother, but I was not happy there, and I wanted to come back to you. I think the doctor said that they must send me back, and her Sesamon said one morning that I could go home, and I am here now." She gave her Sesamon's letter to him and said, "It is for you." The grandfather opened the letter, read it, and put it in his pocket. Then they put Heidi's new clothes into the cupboard and drank milk together. Heidi was very happy, for she was at home again on the mountain with her grandfather and old friends. Chapter 10. A New Day for the Grandfather. It was Saturday, and Uncle took Heidi to the grandmother's hut. Heidi ran in, and the grandmother asked, "Is it you, child? Have you come again?" "Yes," said Heidi, and gave her hand to the old woman. The old woman said, "I like the bread you gave me, Heidi. Now I am more healthy, but I am afraid that it would finish one day." Brigitte said, "They make this white bread in Dörfli, but I cannot buy it. It's expensive." Then Heidi told her, "I know what I will do. I have a lot of money. I will give it to Peter, and he can bring it up from Dörfli." The grandmother answered, No, child, I cannot let you do that. You must give the money to your grandfather, and he will tell you how you will spend it." But nobody could stop her from doing that, so she said, "If you eat white bread, it will do you good." Then Heidi saw the grandmother's songbook and said, "Grandmother, I can read now. Would you like me to read you one of the songs from your old book?" "Oh, yes," said the grandmother. She was surprised. "But can you really read, child?" Heidi took the book and opened it. She started to read one song about the sun. The grandmother was very happy, and Heidi liked to give her such happiness. When Heidi went home, she told her grandfather everything. "Grandfather, I want to give my money to Peter so he can buy white bread for the grandmother." He told her, "The money is yours, do what you want. You can buy bread for grandmother for years." Now Heidi was very happy. She said, "God knew that it was the time, and He helped me then. And now everything is happier. I will always pray to God and always thank Him." Clara's grandmother told me everything about it. If somebody runs away from God, God runs away from him too. But if somebody always remembers God, then God always helps him. The grandfather told Heidi, "If somebody runs away from God, God never helps them again. It is always so. Nobody can go back." Heidi said, "No, no, grandfather. If they say, 'I am sorry, God, help me again,' then God turns to them and helps again. There is a story about it in my book. I will read it to you, grandfather, and you will listen to it all." Uncle sat down, and Heidi began to read a story about a boy. He was happy and rich at home with his father, but one day he wanted to have his own job and asked his father to give him money. Then he left his home and went away, but he spent all his money and he was poor now. He was very unhappy, and he thought of his old happy life at home. He wanted to go back to his father. The boy said, "I am sorry, father, please let me be your son again." When his father saw him poor and unhappy, he said, "Come, my son, everything will be happier now." And they lived together forever. Heidi looked at her grandfather and waited for him to say something. He said it was a beautiful story, but he didn't look really happy. A few hours later, Heidi went to sleep. The grandfather went upstairs to look at her. She was sleeping peacefully. He watched her sleeping for a long time. Then he folded his hands and said slowly, "God, I am very sorry for my old days. Please help me again." And he cried. The next morning, he woke up early and wore his best clothes. He called Heidi. "Come along, Heidi, the sun is up. Wear your best dress because we are going to church together." Heidi was ready to go now, and the grandfather took Heidi's hand, and together they walked down into the mountain path. Heidi and her grandfather came into the church at Dörfli and sat down at the back. Everybody was very shocked, and they watched them in surprise. Then the grandfather took Heidi and went to an old friend's house. People were waiting outside the house because they wanted to see what would happen. The old friend met Uncle and Heidi. Uncle couldn't speak at first, but then he said, "I have come to say that your words are true. I will find a place at Dörfli for the winter, because it is not easy for Heidi on the mountain. I want you to help me now. If the people here will not be friendly to me, I know it is because of my old days. I was not a good man." But the old man was very happy to hear it, and he said, "I would like you to live with us again. You are a good friend and neighbor to me." Then Heidi and Uncle left the old friend's house and started to walk home. When the people saw that Uncle left his friend's house happily, they thought he was not so bad. They also saw that Heidi seemed very happy with him. They began to feel friendly toward him and said, "We are so happy to see you among us again." They all talked to him kindly. Now the grandfather was happier, and he was as light as a bird. He said to Heidi, "It is good to be at peace with God and people. God was good to me when He sent you to my hut." Heidi and the grandfather went to Peter's hut to see Brigitte and the grandmother. They all sat down and talked together happily. Then Peter came in with a letter in his hand. It was for Heidi. Heidi opened and read it. It was from Clara, and she wrote that during autumn she, her Sesamon, and Frau Sesamon would come for a visit. Everybody in the hut was very excited about it. They all talked about the letter and the visit, so the time passed quickly. Heidi and the grandfather left for their home. Chapter 11. A Visitor. It was a sunny September morning, and the doctor was walking to Herr Sesamon's house. He was very unhappy because of his only daughter's death. A few months ago, she got very ill and she died. Her death was very sudden for the doctor. Herr Sesamon met the doctor in a very friendly way. He said, "Come, my dear friend, we must talk about the journey. Do you still think the same?" The doctor answered, "Yes, my dear Sesamon. It is a very long journey for Clara. She is still very ill. It can be bad for her. She must stay at home, and the next spring, if she is healthy, she can go and visit Heidi on the mountain." Herr Sesamon was very sad, because he didn't want to tell Clara that she must stay at home. But the doctor helped him. They went into Clara's room and told her everything. She was very unhappy to hear it, and she cried. But she knew that she was very ill, so she wanted the doctor to go and visit Heidi. She said, "Please, doctor, go and see Heidi. Give her my messages, give her my presents, and when you come back, tell me all about the mountains, Heidi, the goats, the grandmother." Clara put a lot of presents into boxes and bags. Cakes, coffee, bread, thick clothes for the winter, and so many other things. The doctor and all these presents were ready to go to the mountains now. In the morning, Heidi got up early and wore her dress. It was a beautiful day, so she ran out quickly and listened to the sound of the wind. Then she saw Peter coming with his goats. He asked her, "Are you coming out with me today?" Heidi said, "No, I am not. They are coming from Frankfurt today. I must be at home when they come." After Peter went away, Heidi started to wait for her visitors. Then she saw the doctor coming, and she called out, "Grandfather, come, come!" Heidi ran to the doctor. "Good morning, doctor, and thank you so many times." They were very happy to see each other again. When Heidi asked the doctor where Clara and her grandmother were, the doctor told her everything kindly. Heidi was unhappy at first, but later she said, "Time passes quickly here, and when they come here in spring, they can stay longer. Clara will love here more in the spring." The grandfather met the doctor very kindly. They all sat down and had dinner together. The grandfather said, "We do not have a good bed for you, so you would stay at Dörfli and come up every morning. I can take you to all parts of these beautiful mountains." The doctor liked this idea, and before he left, he gave all the presents to Heidi. "Clara sent them to you and your friends." Heidi was very excited, and she started to open them quickly. She was happier and happier every time she opened a present. Heidi took the presents, which were for Peter and the grandmother, and they all walked down the mountain. Heidi asked the doctor, "Would you like to come out with the goats tomorrow morning?" The doctor said, "Yes, we will go together." Then he and the grandfather left Heidi at Peter's hut, and they went down to Dörfli. Heidi ran into the grandmother and gave her all the presents. The old woman was very happy to have the cakes, the coffee, and the thick shawl for the winter. Heidi told them everything, and they said, "Your friends are very kind, Heidi." It was growing late, and the grandfather came to take Heidi home. They walked up to the hut very happily and peacefully. Chapter 12. The doctor wants to be happy again. The next morning, the doctor climbed up from Dörfli with Peter and the goats. They took Heidi and walked up the mountain. Heidi held the doctor's hand and talked about everything around them. The flowers, the sun, the birds, everything was so beautiful. Then they all sat down on the grass and watched this beauty. The doctor asked Heidi, "If somebody is unhappy here, can you tell me anything that will help?" Heidi thought for a minute and answered, "When you do not know what to do, you must go and tell everything to God." The doctor said, "Heidi, I sit here. Everything around me is beautiful. I know it is beautiful, but I cannot see it because of my unhappiness." Heidi was very unhappy to hear it. She thought of the grandmother's songbook and the song about the sun. She told the doctor about the song, and he wanted her to sing it. Heidi thought this song would make him happy again, and she started to sing it. The doctor listened to her and thought of his old days. When he was a child, his mother always sang this song to him. After the song, Heidi and the doctor drank milk together, climbed and talked for a long time. When it got dark, they said goodnight to each other and went back home. Every morning the doctor came up to the hut, and Uncle met him in a friendly way and took him everywhere he liked. They were good friends, so the time passed quickly and happily for them. After a month, it was time to go home for the doctor. Everybody was very sad. The doctor thanked the grandfather for everything, and he said goodbye. Heidi walked down the mountain with him. When the doctor said, "Now, Heidi, you must go back, and I must say goodbye," Heidi started to cry. The doctor wanted her to stop crying and said, "No, no, dear child, do not cry. But tell me that if I am ill and alone one day, will you come and stay with me? I want to hear this. Tell me." Heidi said quickly, "Yes, I will come when you call me. I love you as much as grandfather." Then they said goodbye to each other, and the doctor walked down the way. Chapter 13. Winter in Dörfli. It was a very cold winter. When it started to snow, Uncle closed his hut on the mountain, and he went down to Dörfli with Heidi and the goats. They found an old house to live in, and Heidi started to go to school in Dörfli every morning. She liked to learn new things. She always wanted to go and visit the grandmother, but the grandfather told her to wait until it stopped snowing. And after some days, there was sun again. Then the grandfather said, "It stopped snowing. You can go with Peter and visit the grandmother." Heidi was very happy to hear it, but when she saw the grandmother ill, in her bed, her happiness went away. "It is very cold, so I am ill. But do not be unhappy, Heidi. Your visits make me better. When you come and read me something, it makes me well again. Will you read me something today?" the grandmother said. Heidi ran into the room and took the book. She read the songs for the grandmother again and again. Then she asked, "Are you well now, grandmother?" The old woman answered, "Yes, I am happy again. I cannot see anything, and nobody comes to visit me. It always makes me very unhappy. But when you come and read the songs to me, then I am so well and happy." When Heidi went home and sat on her bed, she thought of the grandmother and her words. She knew that if she could go and read her something every day, the grandmother would be better and happy. But she didn't know how to go up the mountain every day. It was not easy in the winter. Suddenly, she thought of an idea. She was so happy to know what to do now, but she waited for the morning. Chapter 14. Peter can read now. When Peter finished his lessons in the afternoon, he went to see Heidi. Heidi was waiting for him, and she said to Peter quickly, "I have an idea, Peter." "What is it?" he asked. Heidi said, "You must learn to read well." Then Peter said, "I cannot learn, it's not easy." Heidi said, "If you study more, you can learn it, I know. You must learn it now, because then you can read songs to the grandmother every day." Peter said quickly, "I do not want to read songs to her." Heidi was very angry with him, and she said, "Your mother sometimes says that she wants to send you to Frankfurt. If she sends you, you must go to school in Frankfurt every day, and when you cannot read, they will laugh at you. The teachers in Frankfurt are not friendly, and they always wear black." Peter was afraid of all this. He couldn't say anything at first. Then he said, "Well, I will learn then." Heidi was happy to hear it, and their lesson started after a few minutes. It was not easy for Peter to learn, but he was so afraid. They studied together all winter, and Peter started to read. One evening he came home after leaving Heidi, and he said, "I can read now." Brigitte and the grandmother were surprised. Peter told them, "Heidi showed me how to read and told me to read you a song every day, grandmother." His mother gave him the book quickly, and Peter started to read. They listened to him happily. The next day, he read in the classroom, too. The teacher looked at him in surprise and asked, "But how can you read so well? How did you learn?" Peter answered, "It was Heidi." Every evening, Peter read one song to his grandmother, and she listened to him. She was always happier when Heidi read them for her, because Peter couldn't read as well as Heidi. Chapter 15. Clara visits Heidi. It was May, and the sun took the snow away. Now there were flowers and green grass again. Heidi and the grandfather were at home on the mountain. When Heidi saw her grandfather making new chairs, she said, "I know why you are making them. They are for my visitors from Frankfurt." She was waiting for Clara and her grandmother. Then Peter came up the mountain with his goats, and he gave Heidi a letter quickly. Heidi looked at it and said, "From Frankfurt, from Clara." She was very happy, and she read it quickly. "Dear Heidi, everything is ready for my visit now. I want to see you so much. Every day the doctor comes and tells me everything about his visit. He told me he liked everything very much, the mountains, the flowers, goats, the grandfather, and he wants me to go up the mountain for my health. Grandmother is coming with me, and she sends you her best love. Your friend, Clara." Heidi was very happy, and she wanted to go and tell the grandmother all about the visitors. In the afternoon, she walked down to Peter's hut, and she told the old woman about Clara's letter. The grandmother was not in her bed. She was sitting, and she was better now. But when she heard the news, she looked sad. She was afraid that the visitors would take Heidi back with them again. But she didn't want to make Heidi unhappy, and she said, "Heidi, read me something now." Heidi read songs for her again and again. When the evening came, Heidi went home up the mountain. So May passed, and June came with a hot sun. And one morning, Heidi called her grandfather. "Here they come, they come!" 2 men were carrying Clara in a chair, and the grandmother was coming with them. Heidi and the grandfather met them in a very friendly way. Clara and her grandmother were very happy, and they said, "How beautiful! Everything is so nice. The trees, the flowers, the mountain." Uncle made the table ready for dinner. They all sat down and had a beautiful dinner together. After dinner, they went into the hut to see Heidi's bedroom. Clara liked it very much. Uncle asked the grandmother, "What will you say if Clara stays here with Heidi for a month?" The grandmother was happy to hear it, because it would be good for Clara's health, and she said, "Yes, she can stay here, and I would come and visit you. Thank you so much." Then they started to make a good bed for Clara, and when everything was ready, Uncle took the grandmother to Dörfli. After some time, Peter came down with his goats. Heidi showed them to Clara and told her their names. They were so happy to be with the goats. In the evening, Heidi and Clara were talking in their bed. Heidi asked Clara, "Why are the stars so happy, do you know?" Clara answered, "Why is it?" Heidi told her, "Because they live up in the sky, and they all know that God thinks of us and makes everything better for us. But then we must pray to Him, and we must want His help, so we can be happy and safe." Then Heidi closed her eyes and slept. But Clara looked at the stars in surprise. They were so big and friendly, she liked to watch them until she was asleep. Chapter 16. Clara is happy on the mountain. It was a sunny day, and Uncle woke up early to make the table ready for breakfast. He gave the little girls fresh milk and said, "To your health, child. Drink it up." After breakfast, Peter came with his goat, and he asked Heidi to come with him. Heidi said, "I cannot come for a long time because Clara is with me." Peter was very angry, but he said nothing and went away. Clara and Heidi made a lot of plans for themselves. They first sat down and wrote a letter to Clara's grandmother. Then they talked under the trees. They drank fresh milk and watched the birds, and they slept well at night. 2 days passed in the same way, and the third day there came a surprise for the children. They saw 2 men carrying 2 beds and a letter from Frau Sesemann. These beds were for Heidi and Clara. When Clara returned to Frankfurt, Heidi would take one of the beds to Dörfli in winter. They put the beds in Heidi's bedroom, and the little girls were very happy to sleep in their new beds. Every morning after Uncle carried Clara down, he helped her to stand on her feet for a minute or 2. It was not easy for Clara, but she tried to stand with Uncle's help. Each day, Clara thought it was a great happiness to be here on the mountain, so they spent 3 weeks together. Chapter 17. Clara starts to walk. In the morning, Uncle got everything ready for a short journey. He put Clara's wheelchair in front of the hut and went to call the children. Peter came up at this moment and he saw the chair. He was angry because Heidi was always with Clara and she didn't come out with the goats when Peter asked her. He thought if there wasn't this chair, Clara would stay at home and Heidi would go with him alone. So he gave the wheelchair an angry push and it fell down the mountain path to Dörfli. It went down very fast and broke into pieces. Peter watched it happily and ran away before Uncle came out of the hut. When they saw the chair wasn't there, they were surprised. They thought that the wind would take the chair away. Uncle took the children up to the mountain and left them there with Peter. Then he went to find the wheelchair. It was a very beautiful day. The sun, the flowers, the trees, everything was great. Heidi wanted Clara to see the flowers, but Clara said, "I cannot walk and you cannot carry me. You are smaller than me." Then Heidi wanted Peter to help Clara take her own steps. With their help, Clara took steps. She could walk now. Heidi and Clara were very happy, and after they walked a little way, they sat down among the flowers. They had dinner together, so the hours passed. That evening, when Peter came to Dörfli, he heard the people talking about the wheelchair. They were saying, "The wheelchair must be very expensive. If the rich man comes from Frankfurt, he will ask the police to find out who did it." Peter was very afraid of these words, so he didn't say or eat anything that night. Clara took steps more easily each day, and she could walk longer now. Uncle told them to write a letter to Frau Sesemann. Clara's grandmother would come and see Clara walking now, and it would be a big surprise for her. Chapter 18. Goodbye until we meet again. That morning, Peter brought up Frau Sesemann's letter. When Heidi read that the grandmother was coming in the afternoon, she started to clean the hut. So the morning passed quickly, and Frau Sesemann came up the mountain. Clara and Heidi began walking to the grandmother, and when she saw Clara on her feet, she was so surprised. She took Clara's hands in her hands and said happily, "Thank you, God, and thanks, my dear uncle." Clara's cheeks were red now, and she was looking very well. They sat down to their dinner in front of the hut, and they told the grandmother everything. At this moment, Herr Sesemann was walking up the mountain. He'd finished his business in Paris, and then he came to Dörfli to surprise Clara and Heidi. But he himself was surprised when he saw Clara walking. He ran to his daughter and took her in his arms. He was so happy, and he thanked Uncle for his help. Then the 2 men started to talk in a very friendly way. At this moment, Frau Sesemann saw some beautiful flowers under the trees, and she said, "Dearest God, who put these flowers here? They are so beautiful." Then she saw Peter was coming, and she thought Peter put them. She called Peter. "Boy, come here. Was it you who did it?" Peter didn't see the flowers, and he thought Herr Sesemann was a policeman, and Frau Sesemann was talking about the wheelchair. Peter said, "Yes, I did, and it broke into pieces. I am so sorry." Then everybody knew that Peter broke the chair. Frau Sesemann said, "That was a very wrong thing to do, and you know it. I see you are very sorry. But it is good for Clara. because she can walk now. So, Peter, now you know what is wrong and what is right. But now tell me, what do you want as a present?" Peter was surprised. He looked at her and didn't talk for a few minutes. Then he said, "A penny!" Frau Sesemann told him, "Then I will give you a penny every week for life." At this moment, Herr Sesemann and Alm Uncle were talking. Herr Sesemann asked, "My dear friend, you made Clara healthy and happy. You helped her walk. It is the biggest happiness for me. Tell me now, how can I thank you for everything? Speak, friend, and tell me what I can do." Alm Uncle said, "I am old and I am not rich. When I die, I cannot leave any money to Heidi. After I die, help Heidi and don't leave her alone." Herr Sesemann said, "I will have Heidi as my own child. Do not be afraid about it. Heidi will not be alone. My friend the doctor will come here too. He wants to live here and he loves Heidi as much as his own daughter." Alm Uncle was very happy to hear it. Frau Sesemann asked Heidi the same question. "Tell me, my child, what do you want as a present?" Heidi said quickly, "I want my bed in Frankfurt. I will give it to Peter's grandmother, so she can sleep well and be warm in winter." Frau Sesemann liked this idea and said, "I will send your bed to the grandmother, Heidi." Then they all went down the mountain and visited the grandmother. Heidi told her everything, and Frau Sesemann said to her, "My good grandmother, Heidi is not coming with us. Do not be afraid. She will stay here with you. We will come and visit her here when we want to see her, but now we must say goodbye. Next year when I come to Dörfli, I will visit you too." Frau Sesemann, Herr Sesemann, and Clara left Dörfli the next morning. They said they would come next summer too. They were all happy. A few days later, Frau Sesemann sent the bed to Dörfli. Now the grandmother was sleeping so well and warm. The doctor came to Dörfli too. He bought the old house that Alm Uncle and Heidi lived in during the winter. Now they all lived in the same house. The doctor and Alm Uncle were very good friends. Heidi always visited the grandmother and read her songs. Everybody was so happy, and they thanked God for everything.